things, but
Oops. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
I can.
That,
Yeah, no worries.
I'll talk for a minute. So just as a reminder, this is something that we're trying out here. To basically, we're mirroring what's done on the composition analysis team. They actually have a weekly meeting where they have a show and tell. And the purpose is really just to share what you're working on. It doesn't have to be a demo or anything visual. You can just talk a little bit about some of the things you're doing. It's mostly to facilitate collaboration and knowledge sharing and help build the team a little bit. If you're not quite ready, Alexander, that's totally fine.
I could do some other things. So I can start off if we're good with that.
If not, yeah, if you're ready, then that's fine. If not, that's okay too.
Oh, yeah, it'll be fine. Okay, so I'll share my screen. Share. Okay, so the biggest thing I've been working on is group level policies, having a UI for that, which is very exciting. So here I am in prod, there's a policy page that we don't have anything, or this is a project policy page, doesn't have anything. But if we go up to the group level, you'll see a new policy sidebar option, which is very exciting. And then if you click into there, you get the same page and you're able to do stuff. If we go to a demo with more data, here we have CMP and staging, and we have this new source column. It says inherited from the project or the group. If you click on that, it takes you to that group level policy page, and it says source this group. It shows up in the sidebar to source this group only. If you go back to the project, you click on there, it says this project level policy. Gotten inherited, it says where it's inherited from, and again you have a link to click off to the group level policy page. And you'll notice that these group level policies, the edit button is disabled. We don't want people changing them from this level. Again, we have a third link to go back to the group level. I don't know if that's too many links, but it's fine as an MVP. And then at the group level, you can edit the policy. If you click on that, does give you this information up here that this policy will affect many projects in this group. Applies to all projects. This maybe you should say projects and subgroups in this group. Maybe someone could take a note of that change for me. And then what else? Yeah, otherwise editing this is just business as usual. So you modify something, click the configure with merge request, and it takes you to an MR that's been created. So that's very exciting. There it is, changes. Woo! Any questions about the features thus far? Cool.
No, that looks great. I know we've already got several users who are really excited about this feature. So
yes, I saw that thread in Slack. Someone was like, how are we going to do this? And you're like, we have a thing for it, which is great. Next item on my agenda has been the validation for the policy editor. I have an MR up for that right now. And so that is going to alert users that if they're typing something incorrectly in the YAML mode for the scan execution policy, it's going to let them know, hey, that's not correct. So in this example, I've typed scan execution policy and I've put an A at the end, and it gets this little squiggly line underneath being like, hey, that needs to be scan execution policy. So this is a way that we can help our users type things in, make sure things are typed in correctly. Also, we can in this one, we don't have a value for name. It's commented out, and we get a little squiggly here. It says incorrect type that needs to be a string. So users aren't accidentally switching up types for all these different values. And so that is up for review right now, working through it. I have an MVP, but needs a little refinement before it gets merged. I have a question for this actually feature. There's validation in the policy editor here. Do we, Sam, do you know if we need or would want validation on the file if someone's editing the policy.yaml directly?
Oh, can we do that?
I think we might be able to.
If we can do that, that would be cool. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. I can look into that.
That wasn't necessarily part of this issue, but if it's easy to do, I mean, that definitely would be a desirable thing to answer your question. So
got it. Yeah, the schema that we get from the back end for this validation actually is for the policy.yaml file, or no, how should I say this? It's for multiple policies where the policy editor is a single policy editor. Well, technically you could add multiple policies, I think, maybe. Actually, don't quote me on that. But I've had to massage the schema to fit this use case. I think by default, it would work better for the policy.yaml, or work out of the box for the policy.yaml file. So I'm gonna look into how hard that is as a separate MR.
okay.
Cool. Any questions on that feature?
Yeah, I have a question actually. Thanks for demoing that. I was going to ask about the schema. If you're like, but if you implement something else for the validation, but you kind of answered that already, that you're kind of doing something in the front end now instead of using the schema.
Yes. Let me bring up the issue.
If it's too technical for today, that's fine. It's just that I got curious when I saw that.
Yeah, there's a great link somewhere. Maybe I just send this to you later. Basically, I got the schema and was where's the backend issue? It's just that the schema looks slightly different for multiple policies than it does for a single policy. And where is my post? Yeah, so this is the difference in format for the policy. So in the policy.yaml file, it's scan execution policy, and then it's an array of policies. Whereas for the single policy editor, the scan execution or policy shows up as a type property, and then it's not the array. It doesn't have an array underneath it. It just has all these values. So I basically had to move the schema around a little bit so that these aren't an array underneath this thing. And then there's a type property, but it's not too much. And the massaging I have to do isn't changing the schema. It's basically moving things around. So if the schema changes in like what a property accepts as a value or what that value is, we'll get that immediately for this validation as well.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. And the other question is that, are we allowing the user to click on the configure with the merge request, even if it's invalid, or are we kind of blocking the user there?
That's a great question. I hadn't thought about that. And I probably won't do that for the V1 because getting the schema implemented is going an environment itself, but I'll look into that as a V2. The
only concern I would have is that we can have, let's say that the schema is in the group level. Let's say that the project, the policy is in a group level. We can have different projects And then a policy might have some rules for some projects that don't make sense to other projects. Let's say like branch names and user and things like this. So then blocking the user would be tricky. I wouldn't be able to suggest how we could go forward with that.
For the V1 of the rule mode for scan execution policy, I don't even think we are retrieving all the branches for child policies or child projects or subgroups if we were to allow rule mode at the group level. So, and that validation wouldn't even be part of the schema. The schema is not going to have branch names, allow branch names. It's going to say, you know, this can be an array. So I don't think we have to worry about your concern in terms of the schema, but we do have to worry about that for rule mode for the group level policies. But Sam and I have had some back and forth about that in one of the issues.
I think the branch names would be really hard to validate because if I'm not mistaken, I believe we support like wildcarding there too. So you can just put an asterisk and, you know, catch all. So some of that might get really tricky to validate.
True. Does that answer your question, Samir?
Yeah. Thanks a lot for working on this. It's looking awesome.
Thank you. My third thing I wanted to show off is maybe it's only in the GK actually. Actually, it might be turned on in this project. Let me check to see if I have something, if I can demo this on staging quick. And it's basically as I've alluded to, rule mode on scan execution policies. No, I suppose it wouldn't be turned on for the group level. Maybe it's turned on for one of these project levels. And I have one MR up, or one MR merged for adding the feature flag and adding some, oh, there it is. Yeah, look at that. Yeah, here's what I have thus far. We've got the name, the description, and the policy status, as well as the preview and the buttons here. This first MR added the feature flag, as well as made all of these fields and these components sort of generic or inherited for every policy. So before, these fields had to be manually implemented for every policy type, both scan execution and scan result, but I arranged the code differently. So now that if, for every subsequent policy types we create, we immediately get name, description, policy status for free. And then because all the differences between these policies is of course the rules and the actions, which have to come next for this MR. But well, it's not perfect, but we're working on it.
Yeah, it looks great. I noticed, I think the YAML.YAML preview formatting is a bit off. I think I might have even seen that weird behavior on the scan result policies too. I'm not 100% sure.
Oops.
Yeah, I guess we can always test it out real quick, but.
Oh yeah, there it is.
So it might be a shared formatting bug there.
Yes, I will take a look at that. If I do new policy on a project that feature flag is not turned on, does that same thing happen? It does. I will look into that. But yeah, so that's just in its beginning stages, and I'm working on that next.
Yeah, that looks great. Thanks, Alexander. So Brian's not here. I can walk through a couple of his items because I'm pretty familiar with it. I don't know how much have all of you been following the continuous vulnerability scans epic? I don't
Not at all
with details, but so right now when dependency scanning runs as well as container scanning, we output two artifacts, right? We output one artifact for vulnerabilities And we output another artifact for dependencies. And those dependencies get fed into the dependency list page. Let me pull this up so I can show you. It's here under security and compliance dependency list. I don't know if any of you have taken a look at this at all, but basically it lists out all of the dependencies that are used in the project. And again, both dependency scanning and container scanning feed into this. So you see our container scanning results are here. It shows the location as an image. If you come down, the dependency scanning results come in and the location is a file, and the packager is like a Python or pip. But essentially, all of these come in here. Right now, this UI is being created from the artifact file. So none of this information is in our database. It's actually being parsed out and read from that artifact file individually when the page is loaded. That's great for an MVC, but as we look to scale this, that's just not really scalable. If we ever want to have a group level dependency list or support searching or sorting or filtering beyond what we have today, it just doesn't really work. And in addition, there are some other challenges that we have with both container and dependency scanning, because right now the vulnerability database gets updated separately from when we run scans. So it's possible that someone runs a scan and a year goes by, and of course now we have all these new vulnerabilities in our advisories database, but the data that's shown from those scans is outdated. And then also we have a separate license scanning job that's being run that looks for licenses. So, what we have is great for an MVC, but going forward long-term, it's not super efficient, and it's not really what we want the architecture that we want to support our needs. So we're revamping almost everything here. We're doing a major overhaul where now the container scanning and dependency scanners will no longer actually do any scanning, in the sense that they're not identifying any vulnerabilities. Instead, they will just be generating a list of components, dependencies that exist in the container image or in the project, but they won't actually be doing any lookups against the advisory database. So that's where we're headed long-term anyway. And then we're going to have this new service that will ingest that data into our GitLab Postgres database. And then we're actually also going to store our advisory database in the GitLab database. And that will allow the scanning to be done on the server side in Rails, where we'll be able to have this vulnerability match service that runs. So instead of identifying vulnerabilities as part of the pipeline job, the pipeline is just getting a list of dependencies. And then the actual scanning or comparison is done on the server side anytime either of these two change. So that way the list of vulnerabilities is always up to date, even if it's been a whole year since you last ran your scans. And the idea is we can actually reuse that same information for licenses as well. So it's a really big project. It actually, in theory, won't change the UI at all. The UI will continue to work exactly the same way it does now, but all of the back end for this is getting a major overhaul. And that's the working group that Brian's been on. Before I go any further in the notes that he put here in the doc, are there any questions on that? That's kind of a lot to cover.
What is an SBOM?
SBOM, great question. It's an acronym for Software Bill of Materials. It's basically the same thing you see here in the dependency list. It's your list of what went into this project to make it what it is. So to break this out into work, we've basically separated this out in a few different epics. One is to have the container scanner generate an SBOM, basically just a list of dependencies. And then we need the dependency scanner to produce a list of dependencies. So those are each their own epic. We have an epic for ingesting the SBOM and storing it in the database. And then we have separate epics for bringing in the advisory database, doing the match, and then servicing up all of the APIs out to the front end. So it's a really quite a big project, but we're collaborating on it between both our group and the composition analysis group. So Brian's been working on this first piece, which is the SBOM ingestion. And that's really the piece of all of this that we're highlighting today, is this ingest SBOM reports epic. And so to start that off, they had a big spike to estimate the resource usage that would be accumulated and the size of the database tables, and see if this was something that was going to scale, if they could keep the database small enough to make this work. They created out this big database diagram table that you might be interested in looking at. In any case, this spike is closed, and they've made some really good progress on actually creating these tables in the database. And then the next steps, it looks like they're going to work on creating the report parser and going back to his notes, and the report ingestion service are the next two that they're working on through this. I think Alan actually picked up one of the issues in here to have the container scanning analyzer start outputting an SBOM of dependencies to be ingested by this. So that piece is already in progress as well. For the initial work, we're actually just going to output that in addition to the other artifacts that we already support. So that way it's not a breaking change, and we can just add support for that and then remove the other artifacts later on. But
Since on a long term, are we planning to also update the approval rules based on that new information?
Yes, ideally that would happen as well. So it would all be, it basically would become synchronous, right? The pipeline only finds the list of dependencies, but after that, it's just continuously rescanned, if you will, right? It's continuously updated anytime we get new advisory database information.
Thank you.
So yes, ideally, once this is done, we'll have that applied to security approvals as well. And actually, this is where the composition analysis team owns the license check as well, and so all of this should apply to licenses just the same as vulnerabilities. We'll have a license information database, which will basically be the equivalent of the advisory database. And this will get updated asynchronously. And then we'll be able to just do a match here to generate the list of licenses for the project or for the pipeline or for the branch. And so it's the same thing, right? Both for our security approvals and for license compliance, we want that to be the same. In fact, I see license compliance really coming together with security approvals. Eventually, we've got an epic. I think it's on your backlog too, but it's a little ways down there. But removing license check and the license compliance page and replacing that with these license approval policies. So ideally, we'll move that into our security policy editor as well. And basically let you pick, do you want to pick a license policy or a security scanner policy here at the beginning? And if it's a license policy, they can define what they're looking for. So again, we're kind of trying to make the license check go away in the same way we got rid of vulnerability check. So there's a lot in the vision for this. It's a really big project and we're just starting in, but I'm really excited because it's going to reduce our tech debt. It's going to make this continuous. It's going to allow users to search for dependencies across all of their projects in GitLab. And it's going to pave the way for us to do that continuous scanning of all of the images in the GitLab registry. This is kind of a prerequisite for that epic anyway, that we've got on our backlog. So a lot to look forward to here.
Yeah, and it looks like going away from pipeline, I think it reduces lots of the confusion that sometimes some users, they end up with some confusions on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, searching for dependencies across all of the projects, that is a very, very common feature request. It's probably the biggest thing on the composition analysis side that we need to add right now. especially after things like Log4j. Companies are coming and saying, how can I know which projects in my organization are using Log4j? And right now the answer is, well, you can go into each project, or you can set up something with our APIs, and it's not a great answer, right? You should be able to just go into our UI, type in Log4j and get an answer and say, oh, here are all the projects that have Log4j as a dependency. And it should really be that easy. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for your time today, and looking forward to doing this again next month.
Thank
I
you.
can also give you an update if you want.
Yeah, sure. We've
I
got
can make it short.
a few minutes.
So I've been working on the background migration for fixing foreign keys of vulnerability findings. It's nothing I can show, of course. Concerns around 170,000 rows, and problem with them was that they were not accessible via API. So currently I'm working with scan result policies for the first time, and I'm making them apply to merge requests created in the past, as they currently only apply to merge requests created in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, that will be super helpful. That's caused a lot of confusion, as Zamir knows, with our current user base. So that will be really helpful. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.
See you,
Bye-bye.
friends.